Hello, friends. We are back again for day 6 of the Boss Women Summit. Today, I have Gina Mo with me. Some of you may know her. She is also my biz bestie, so I couldn't not bring her on. Hello, Gina.
Hi, Heather.
How are you? I'm good. How are you, my love?
Doing good, trying to keep as much routine as possible during these crazy times.
I know, so crazy. So there are a bunch of people who do not know you. So can you just kind of tell us about you and how you kind of got to this position of where you are being a communication coach?
Yeah, so I am a confident communication coach and online marketing strategist, and it basically means that everything that allows you to have some clarity in your messaging, some confidence in the way you show up in your business, and then ultimately a really powerful strategy to create consistency in that presence that you're creating. And that actually came from me first being a classical singer. I went to my undergrad to be a classical singer and quickly realized that my performance anxiety of being on stage was actually kind of debilitating and kind of had me go a different direction. And I wound up going to grad school for performing arts administration, where I fell in love with marketing. And then after that, I started dabbling in entrepreneurship, where I started going for copywriting and blogging and social media strategy and all of that. And all of the guilt that I started to feel about letting go of music and walking away from it, because I did have this incredible talent, was, I spent all this energy, all this money and everything. What was that for? What was the purpose? And when I finally just kind of took a look at my life and, really took stock of everything I was up to, I realized that everything I had done was really a sequence of connection, and it was a sequence of language and messaging, because singing in classical music is often not in English. So I had to connect in other ways, and marketing is all about language and communicating your value. And then entrepreneurship, the areas I was in, it all circled around language. And so it's something that I realized, my performance background really kind of gave me a different edge when it came to speaking and public speaking coaching. And then in addition to that, all the marketing practices just helped me be able to do it in a confident way, a clear way, but also an engaging way. So it's a bit of an interesting path that I had coming to the point that I'm at, but now I'm just in love with everything that I create for my clients.
I love that. I love it. I love it. You guys, I am one of the few lucky ones who have actually been able to hear Gina sing. Amazing. A voice of an angel for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. I had a question in my head and I completely mind blanked on what I was gonna right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
It kind of, half of it came back to me. So and I just lost it because this thing popped up on my screen. Take it. Working from home. Yay, fun times. So you said that this was such a long, roundabout way to get to where you are now, but I feel like it's so important to know that, that's sometimes how it goes. As you need to do, and I wouldn't say detours, but it's these stepping stones along a path to get to where you're supposed to be now, because then now that you're here and in this space and the clients that you work with, you're able to serve them in such a stronger way that you would not have been able to, had you not gone through all of these things and kind of your own personal growth to get to that. So would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny because, again, the guilt I had about walking away from music was also the guilt and shame that I had around pivoting so many times. It was like, okay, I'm doing this thing. Just kidding. I'm doing this thing. Just kidding. I'm doing this thing. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see at the time how that was actually something building and a cumulative sort of toolbox that I was building for myself to do what I'm doing now. Because at the time, I just felt like I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what my purpose was. Because what would happen is I get really excited about something for a couple weeks, maybe a month, and just sit there wondering, okay, why isn't this working? Why do I have no desire to do this anymore after such a brief period of time? But again, looking in hindsight, it's like, no, that all really builds up an interesting foundation that to me builds a sense of credibility, builds a sense of authority. And that's something that I think people don't really realize about their own journey too. So it's seeing everything that you've done. And one of the things that I always ask my clients when they're, going through a strategy session with me, I want to know every job you've ever had. And they think it's a strange question, but it's like, okay, well, you start to see the patterns of okay, you've worked in the service industry for a really long time. And then you worked in this industry for a long time where, again, it was a lot of client relations. And even though on paper they may not seem directly related, there's a sense of the responsibilities that you had that it's like, okay, you kept gravitating toward these particular things use that, lean on that, like let yourself really hone that and say, this is something I've been doing for 20 years, something I've been doing for 15, 10 years.
Mhm.
And being able to recognize that is something that now I have a great sense of pride in, as opposed to all that shame. And I was able to let it go and actually see it as more of a superpower.
Oh, I love that. It's so good. I love it. Well, you guys, I've actually worked with Gina, and I were biz besties, but we also help support each other in different ways. So she's actually kind of walked me through this process, and I was like, why do you need to know all these things? But when you write it down and you go back to look, and we had a conversation about it, it's important because it all plays into who you are now as a person, and being clear about what you want to do. So, which leads me to my first question for you is, in this time of this quarantine where everything's crazy and we're on this lockdown, how do we get clarity in our own messaging? How do we have it especially if maybe we're feeling confused?
Yeah, the clarity is definitely the first and foremost thing, because right now the online space is so saturated, far more than normal, simply because that's where people are forced to go. So if you don't have that clarity, then odds are that, you're just going to be part of the noise and you're not really going to land with anybody. So it's important to have that clarity. And the first way that you can really find that is to take a look at your messaging and be able to really be honest with yourself, get some feedback from people that you trust, and even strangers who you believe are your ideal clients. Like, what are you seeing and what are you experiencing in the way that I put my business out there, in the content that I put out there, in my, my bio section, my website, like all of that content, anywhere there's language, even the visuals, as you obviously speak.
Yes.
It's so important to have cohesiveness with that. So if you're asking somebody, what is it you think I do? Who is it you think I serve? What do I offer? Like, you need to have clarity around all of those things. And so when I do, a clarity clinic is what I call it with my clients, the four things that we really hone in on is your why and your mission, because that's the first thing that people want to know is, why the hell do you care? And why am I not just a paycheck to you? They want to know your superpowers, which is sort of what I was just speaking into, of this idea of, what makes you different, and not necessarily what makes you better than somebody else, but just what makes you different in how I work with you, your personality, what you bring to the table, and just, the experience you've had. Again, coming from a performance background is very different than some of my competitors, right? My peers in this space. And I believe that just gives you a different experience that maybe somebody really feels connected to and wants. And then the third thing is, getting very clear on who it is you serve, so that we can make a strategy around all those things. And if you don't have clarity on all four of those things, then something's getting lost in the shuffle. And it's not just you who has to think of that clarity, it's the people you're trying to actually talk to that need to have that clarity. If they can't echo it back to you the way that you're intending, then something's wrong.
Absolutely. Because if they're your intended audience and you're putting this message out, whether it's just your services or something of value, and they on the receiving end are not, like, it's not computing and it's not a follow through for them, then something is definitely wrong, because they're the ones you definitely want to make sure understand it. So I think sometimes I see a lot of posts and content of things where people try to overcomplicate things and try to use fancy words and things. And I think sometimes, and maybe I might be wrong, is that sometimes simpler is better, because you don't, not that you're dumbing it down, but you're saying it in simple terms so that anybody can understand it. There's no confusion. And again, it keeps that clarity.
Unless you're specifically trying to focus on somebody who is a little more advanced, who does understand that jargon, those sorts of things. But you're absolutely right. Like, the simpler you keep it, because the way I always explain this is, you're coming from the woke side of the equation. You know better. That's why you have a business around this particular thing, right? Like, if somebody comes to me and they ask, okay, well, I don't really know how to explain what I do. I don't really like calling myself a financial planner or whatever. And, they just talk to me a little bit more about why it is they do what they do. And I can say, oh, so you're a financial freedom advocate. And they just look at me like, how did you do that? And it's like, well, this is my specialty. But if I was to go out there and start talking like all of the, like, it wouldn't translate for people. I want to talk to financial freedom. They wouldn't know what that means until we walk through that whole process. So I have to speak the language that you're speaking. And this is exactly why my first business failed completely, was because I was focusing on coaching musicians how to be entrepreneurs. And that's how I marketed it. I wanted to coach musicians into how to be entrepreneurs, because that's not what we learned in college. We learn how to build a portfolio. We learn how to do technique and all of these things. We do not learn how to network, how to find auditions, how to connect with people that'll actually get us where we want to go. And That's not what they wanted. They didn't want to be entrepreneurs. They wanted to know how to do their taxes. They wanted to know how to meet people in the industry. But because I was saying it in a way that made sense to me and not in a way that actually spoke into their pain point, they didn't want to buy it because they didn't see the value in it. And when you're not speaking their language, they don't see the value in what it is you're bringing, even if you think you're saying the same thing.
Totally. I think that's case in point.
Yeah.
Like literally case in point. Yeah, I love it. So how do we keep moving forward? How do we have, the confidence within ourselves? How do we do this so that we can keep moving forward? Because so many people are, they're scared because times are uncertain and things are crazy. And sometimes, myself included lately, that sometimes there are a couple of days that I just want to pull back, right? I don't want to be visible, but then at the same time, like, I also want to be visible. I want to be seen and still let people know that I'm here for them, because if I don't, I feel like maybe I'm going to lose my business. Right.
Yeah. So the other two things, the clarity is the first and foremost, because if you don't have the clarity, there's nothing you can create that's actually going to serve you. So once you have that clarity, then you got to step into what I call this confidence and consistency loop. And people think you need to wait for certain things to happen to have the confidence in order to move forward, but that's not really it. You actually just have to take action first, which builds your confidence. And when your confidence builds, then you show up more because you're like, oh look, it's working, and you're proud of yourself that even if it doesn't work exactly as you intended, you're getting information, you're getting feedback from people about what is and isn't working. So it does feed the confidence, and you want to show up more. And the one thing about, you're talking about like scary times, and you don't always feel like it, right? Like there's this sense of feeling like you always have to be super motivated in that, because it's my business. If I'm not 100% passionate about it all the time, then there's something's wrong. And that's just bullshit. Like, life does not work that way. So we have to just keep showing up, and it is 100% okay for it not to be the same energy every single day. The reality is that we are emotional beings. We have different tendencies, and whatever day brings something else, and that is completely okay. And what's important about that is that it kind of changes the tempo of your marketing strategy. So nobody likes a one-trick pony. They don't want to just sit and listen to a song that stays right here. They want to listen to a song that goes up and down and speeds up and slows down and has that's why there's bridges and choruses and verses of music, right?
Yes.
It makes it more interesting. And your marketing strategy has to be the same. You can't just be hitting one note all the time of like, bubbly energy, yay! Because number one, it's not authentic. Number two, it gets boring. It gets so boring after a while.
Monotonous.
It's so monotonous. And so when you're feeling vulnerable, when you're feeling scared, if you're to lean into that, the vulnerability and authenticity that's going to shine through, like, you can feel energy through people's content. You can feel when they're forcing it, and like you're saying, it's kind of stifled and the words are weird and like it just doesn't read right. When somebody is vulnerable and authentic and they kind of take it back a little bit and they get soft with you, it is a very connected sort of experience to read something like that. And they respect that somebody's willing to be that vulnerable in such a public space. So the right people are really going to respond to that. And you'll notice that, maybe people don't respond publicly. Maybe they'll private message you and say, thank you so much for sharing this. But it does change the tempo of what you're doing, and it does keep it more interesting. So I always tell people to lean in when that happens. Your tendency is to want to hide because you're scared, because you're confused, because you don't know what you're doing, or you just feel like you don't know what you're doing. But lean into that and see what beauty you can create with that new feeling.
Yeah, because what kind of connections are you potentially able to have with people that have been in your audience and watching your stuff, but you've never actually had a conversation with them? And this is what opens the door to connect with somebody else and begin a new relationship with them. And it just, and being vulnerable, that I've seen it so many times when people are vulnerable online in a certain way, in not a forced way, but in any true, authentic way, that people resonate so hard when you are able to open up and be like, hey, I'm human. Some shit got fucked up and I'm going to tell you about it because this is what's going on in my life. And when you can do that and people are like, oh, cool, she's just like me. This stuff happens. It is what it is. But often we feel like we have to hide it because people don't want to see it, which actually isn't the truth. People want to know more about you. And those are the kind of things people really want to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Okay. So talking about consistency, right? So why is being consistent, like right now, like why is this even more important? And it kind of leans into like what we were already talking about.
Yeah. So again, that confidence consistency loop, the more consistent you are, the more confident you are, the more consistent you are, the more confident you are. So when you have that consistency, and again, it comes back to having this clarity of strategy, right? And knowing where to pivot and what's working and what's not working. The sooner that you create consistency, the more information you can gather of what is and what isn't working. If you're only showing up sporadically and again, all of this noise going on, you don't have enough information to know whether or not what you're doing is effective. So getting that feedback of, okay, my Facebook Live videos do really well. Maybe I should do more of those. Or this particular topic really got people talking. Me being vulnerable really got people talking. So let's lean more into that and see what else I can create with that. It's all data. And if we don't have that data, we can't really move forward and actually move forward in a growth sort of way. So that consistency not only is going to cut through the noise right now, make sure you stay relevant. You know, like you're saying, you know, your business is kind of in this limbo period right now and you want to hide, but if you don't continue to show up consistently, how are people going to know you're still in business? Maybe they'll just assume you're no longer in business because you're not there, you're not relevant. And when we have to have, you know, those 7 to 12 touches of, you know, marketing in order for somebody to hit and finally want to consider with purchasing with us, we need to keep doing that over and over and over. And I mean, that's what ads are for. That's why we see billboards 7,000 times of the same thing and commercials and all of that, because they know that we have to hit you consistently to finally get you truly thinking about it. I am a sucker for an Instagram ad or a Facebook ad or whatever. And let me tell you, like 5 or 6 times, I'm just like, all right, fine, I'm clicking on this thing. And I have bought more shit that way. You know, it works. I know the tricks. I know the tricks because I teach them and I'm still a sucker for it. It's psychology. You cannot help it.
Anytime you message me and you're like, so I bought a thing. And I said, well, what Facebook ad did you see this time? So it works.
It's true. I bought like $50 worth of peanut butter one day. I bought that hair wax color stuff. I bought rings and lipstick, like that super last lipstick or whatever. Oh God, I am such a sucker for it. But it's because it keeps showing up in my feed.
And it's something that you're interested in. And you're like, oh, I like this. So there's just, I love it.
Yeah.
So
I can't help it.
I know. I love it. It's so good. Can you tell us like what your free resource is about that you're gonna share with people today?
Yeah. So one of the things that people struggle with most, especially around getting clarity and confidence, is being able to talk about themselves in business and really leaning into that as something to be proud of, something to talk about as a way to establish authority. So the resource that I want to give to everybody is the formula for a really powerful and effective about me or bio section, not only for your website, but it's something you can adapt for your social media profiles. And it's just all the little points that you want to make sure you hit to make sure that it's actually doing you justice, to make sure that you're including all the things that really will stand you apart from your other competitors in the space.
It's so good. I can't wait for you guys to download it. If you have any questions about anything, please drop them in the comments. We'll come back and answer them. If you need help, if you're tweaking stuff, you could ask a question about it. And I'm sure Gina will come in and answer for you and just kind of help you out a little bit. But yes, Gina, thank you so much for coming in and spending a little bit of time with me today. I super appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
All right, love. Have a good day.
You too.